Do you have dissenters? Like, how much pushback do you have about these ideas? Do people think you're full of shit?
All kinds of people think I'm full of shit. I am very sector and goal agnostic in my work, which means I don't really care what your investment strategy is. If it doesn't play against demography and geography in a comprehensive way, at best you're hoping that everyone just kind of sways in your general direction. And so there's no shortage of people in a room when I'm speaking who get really upset because they have an investment thesis, or maybe they've bet their company on something that I just see as a non-issue. So obviously the folks in the crypto world have never liked me. And I dropped a video last night about how EVs are just a disaster that aren't going to be with us very much longer. And I've gotten some interesting communications because of that one. Things like this happen with me with almost every presentation. And last year I gave 179 presentations.
What is your perspective on EVs?
They're not nearly as good on carbon as people think. Most of the data that exists doesn't take into the fact that most of this stuff is processed in China, where it's all coal-driven, and it doesn't take into does not take into account the fact that most grids that they run on are also majority fossil fuels, and that extends the break-even time for carbon from 1 year to either 5 or 10, based on what model you're talking on. Cybertruck's far worse than EVs. But the bigger problems, we're just not going to be able to make them much longer. If we really do want to electrify everything, that doesn't just mean EVs, that means the entire system that feeds into the EVs. We need twice as much copper and 4 times as much chromium and 4 times as much nickel and 10 times as much lithium and so on. We have never, ever in any decade in human history doubled the amount of a mainline material production in 10 years, ever. And we need all of this by 2030? No, it's just not technically possible.
So how does the government, say, of California, justify these mandates when they're saying something like by 2035, all combustion vehicles must stop being sold in the state of California?
Well, let's put the ideology to the side, because I'm not even going to try to explain that. I will give a little bit of defense for California, though, because I do consider myself a green. I just think of myself as a green who can do math, so I don't get invited to any of the parties. California's state legislature gives a lot of authority to their state bureaucracy. So the bureaucracy will set the goalposts. No ICEs by 2035. Knowing that the technology doesn't exist, knowing that the supply chains don't exist, but they will set the goalposts. If we get closer to that date, say 2027, and it's apparent that the technology is not proceeding at a pace that will allow that target to be reached, they have the authority already to move the goalposts. And they do this on clean air issues. They do this on toxicity. They've done it on nuclear power. They undoubtedly will end up doing it on EVs.
So do you think it's one of those things where there's a bunch of green people who don't do the math?
Oh, yeah.
And it just sounds great. It falls in line with the progressive ideology. We need to, carbon neutral. We can do this. Everyone go electric.
Yeah, and there is a fascinating discussion happening in the environmental community right now because they're being confronted with reality. So California and Germany have very similar green tech policies, but the Germans have spent 3 times as much as California, but are only getting about 1/5 as much power. Because I don't know if you've ever been to Germany, but the sun doesn't shine in Germany. And now with the Russians on the warpath and their clean-ish energy from natural gas going away, they're going back to lignite coal in force. It was already their number one source of power. Germany, the idea that Germany is green is ridiculous because they rely on really, really dirty coal now, especially so. But there's now a conversation going on between the German environmentalists and the Californian environmentalists about why California, in relative terms, is doing so well at this while Germany is not. And the answer is simple geography. But that's never been part of the conversation in the environmental community before. Now it is. They should have had this conversation 15, 20 years ago, but they're having it now. And as soon as they come to the conclusion, unwillingly, but they'll get there, that we have to choose where we put our copper and our lithium and our nickel, EVs are not going to make the cut at all.
Where will the copper and the nickel and where will all that go?
It'll be focused on the green techs that actually work in the geographic areas where it can be applied. So you put solar panels outside of Tucson. You put wind turbines outside of Tulsa. That works with the technology we have now. You do not put solar panels in Connecticut. That's stupid. That actually increases your carbon footprint.
Because there's no sun.
There's not enough sun to generate enough electricity to pay down the carbon debt that it took to build the stuff in the first place.